All right. Good evening. Let's get started here, or jump into it. I shouldn't say good evening because we're doing this live stream of the Panther-Lair podcast as we do every week, but not everybody tunes into the live stream. A lot of people listen to the podcast as a traditional podcast, and so I can't forget that, even though some of you are looking at it and interacting with it. And we welcome everybody who's here. You have questions or comments, throw them up there, but I can't always say good evening because it's not evening for everybody. You might be listening to this on Wednesday morning or Thursday afternoon or what have you. But welcome to the Panther-Lair podcast. As we do every week, 8:30 Tuesday nights, we tape this thing live on our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All one long word, no hyphens, nothing like that, no dots, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. And, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, if you're watching a replay of the stream or what have you, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'd appreciate that. We want to try and get those numbers up for a number of reasons. YouTube likes those numbers to be big, and so we'd like to, see what we can do. And I see a lot of YouTube channels that have a lot of numbers on them, and I think we can do a little better than we're at. We're at like 600 and some. So go to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Most of the time on these podcasts we go about an hour. Since we switched to doing one podcast a week, we've gone about an hour or so, and that's probably where we'll be. For most podcasts, kind of, with doing a live stream during the podcast, it allows for interaction, comments, and questions. And if there's a lot of comments and questions, we'll keep talking until we run out of them, and if there's not as many and I say everything I want to say, maybe we'll be a little less than an hour. But the reason we went to an hour-long podcast was because we kind of shifted things around. We've been doing 2 half-hour podcasts a week was sort of the schedule. But then a new opportunity came up where we started doing the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan. And that was, we started at the beginning of the football season. It was really exciting. It was fun to have a new kind of audience, a new avenue. I hadn't done radio in a long time, and it was fun to get back into that, into that medium and get into that, whatever you want to call it. It was fun to get back into that space. This is the kind of word that people use, right? Space. I was in that space of, which if you listen to the Grateful Dead, space means something very different, but it's okay. Getting back into that space, it was fun, and it was fun to talk Pitt, and I always felt like people appreciated having an hour of Pitt talk once a week. Just an hour that's just dedicated to Pitt. It's not a segment here and there. It's not just reliant on news happening. It's an hour that's going to be there every week, all year long, 52 weeks a year. Every Saturday morning, 8 a.m. is going to be Pitt talk. Well, the times being what they are, that's not going to be the case. Panthers Insider Show gone on a bit of a hiatus now. So I appreciate loyal listeners, people who checked in on the radio side every Saturday morning. If you are used to sleeping in on Saturdays and you were getting up early for the show, you don't have to do that anymore because we're going to be on a little hiatus. Hope to return for the football season. Also hope there's a football season. So, everything's kind of up in the air. Nobody really knows what's going to happen with a lot of things in life and a lot of things in the world, and not to mention the country and the state and the county and the city and the region. And certainly on the long list of things that are undetermined, the fate of the Panthers Insider Show is pretty low on the priority list, but things are getting changed around at 93.7 The Fan, and I can understand that, and I appreciate the opportunity that they gave us. But so that won't be happening on Saturday morning any longer. So, but I appreciate people who listened, people who checked it out. It was fun. We got calls sometimes, and sometimes we didn't. It was fine because it was an opportunity to get into a different space. So that is no longer happening. But I'm not going to leave you without Pitt content. So we're still going to do this podcast here, this Tuesday night live stream that'll be released on a podcast Wednesday morning that you can get on iTunes or wherever you can stream it through Podbean, and we'll have it on the website on Panther-Lair.com and everything like that. But then we're also going to have a late week podcast. And this is still kind of coming together. I don't want to be that guy who goes out and says a bunch of details about we're going to do this and this and this. And then it doesn't actually, come to fruition. But we've got some ideas about what we can do for a second podcast in the week. And it's just going to be audio only. It's not going to be a live stream just because of what we want to do and how we want to kind of do it. or what I say we, it's the royal we, it's the editorial we, it's what I want to do and how I want to do it. And I've got some ideas about some content that I think will be pretty cool and I think it'll be pretty interesting and I think people will enjoy. And like I say, that's going to be audio only. So make sure you subscribe to, the Panther-Lair podcast. And of course, if you're on Panther-Lair.com, you're going to see that stuff come up all the time. You'll be able to stream it through the browser or what have you. So look for that later in the week, Thursday, maybe Friday. We'll see. Still deciding. Probably going to go for a Friday release. So we'll have this podcast, the live stream on Tuesday night. Audio comes out Wednesday. And then, we'll have a Thursday or Friday thing, probably Friday, second podcast. So we're back. We're going to go back to the 2 podcast model, at least for now. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see if what I want to do with it actually pans out. But we've got some ideas, and I have got some ideas, and I think it'll be pretty interesting. But so change your calendars, mark your calendars. Don't get up early on Saturday morning just to listen to Pit Talk. Get up early and listen to the radio and do the things that you want to do. But there's not going to be a Panthers Insider Show. Get a cold one. Everybody have their beers. I feel like this is just a thing we should do. We should all drink. And if you're in the comment section now, what are you drinking? I've got the New Belgium Voodoo Ranger Starship IPA. It's good stuff. It's, we've talked about this. This is kind of fitting. Been watching a lot of Star Wars movies with my kids lately. This is the, I've talked about this before. I've had Voodoo Rangers before. We had the Guava Spruce Double IPA. That was one of the first sort of official beers of the podcast, that we talked about all the time. And, Voodoo Ranger, the New Belgium comes out with the Voodoo Ranger, and then they have different types of the Voodoo Rangers, and that, Guava Spruce was a really good one, and this Starship IPA is delicious. I've often said I've never really been disappointed with a New Belgium, and that's, that's the case. There've been some that aren't as high on my list as others, but, most Voodoo Rangers are pretty reliable. It's pretty good stuff. So go check that out. Go find some Voodoo Ranger. Go find some New Belgium anything, and then go find some Voodoo Ranger Starship IPA. Got a lot of people in the comments sections already, and we appreciate it. And Brock, I apologize for mangling your last name. Madanik says, where does Pitt go now with Trey McGowan's out? Have you heard anything about transfers they looked at? Trey was my favorite player, so it's disappointing not having him anymore. Big loss in my opinion. And Brock, that's right where I was going to start for tonight's podcast, because I talked on the Panther-Lair Show, or on the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan on Saturday about Trey McGowan's leaving Pitt. I wrote about it in the Friday 321 column on Panther-Lair.com, and all this, I've commented on it in a few spaces, but not here on the podcast, because we did the podcast on Tuesday night. Trey McGowan's, I don't think, he hadn't announced his decision until whatever it was, Wednesday, or, it might have been Wednesday, actually. It might have been Wednesday afternoon. And I'm like, oh, geez, really? I just talked about how I don't know what, McGowan's is going to do, and then he ends up bailing. You can't say it was surprising. I mean, Ryan Murphy was the most likely guy. Ryan Murphy was the one that you circled initially and said, well, he's probably going to be a guy who transfers. McGowan's was on that list. When you look at any number of factors. And then when it comes out after the fact that he wanted an opportunity to play point guard, that wasn't going to happen at Pitt. I don't know if he is or isn't a point guard. I don't know if he can make it as a point guard at the Division I level. I don't know. I don't know what his ceiling is. Maybe a different system, maybe a different situation, maybe a different roster. Maybe he can be a point guard, I guess. It wasn't going to happen at Pitt. Not with Xavier Johnson on the roster, not with Ethiel Horton on the roster, Femi Odekel coming in, maybe a point guard, probably a 2 or a 3. But, they had other guys, and McGowan's was never going to be the full-time point guard at Pitt. And so if that was really his goal, if that's really what he wanted to do in college, and that's where he sees his future is playing the point, yeah, he probably needed to go somewhere else for his final 2 years of college ball. I agree with Brock. It's disappointing. It really is, because it's disappointing on a number of levels. One, because he's a good scoring option. I still think he's a good scoring guard, and I still think he can play in the ACC. He didn't have a great season, and I've said it a bunch of times that I don't think he regressed, but I just don't think he got any better. I think there were key parts of his game that he just didn't improve from his freshman year to his sophomore year. There was, he did improve his assist numbers. His assist numbers got better. But that was pretty much it statistically when you go 1 year to the next. And then, you actually watch him, the eyeball test on the court. He looked like he was doing the same things he was doing, a year ago, which you needed him to get better. And it's the same for Xavier Johnson. McGowens is not unique in this regard. Johnson's in that camp as well. A guy who needed to get better, or else, the team was going to struggle, and that's what happened. Now, but there's more disappointment about it, I think, and some of that came from the fan reaction, and I'm not surprised what some of the fan reaction was, but I mean, there were some Pitt fans who seemed to be happy that Trey McGowens was leaving Pitt, and I don't understand that. I shouldn't say I don't understand that. I do understand that. I see where they're coming from. He was a frustrating player this past season, but I no matter what you think of his performance this past year, I don't think you can forget what he meant to the program. He was the first guy to commit. A month after Jeff Capel gets hired, he reclassifies and commits to Pitt. Before Xavier Johnson, before Idris Toney. He was the one who said, I believe in what this guy is selling. He was the one who said, I'm gonna commit. I'm gonna be part of this. I'm gonna be part of this rebuild with Jeff Capel at Pitt. And I don't think that's unimportant. Excuse me, they probably still would have gotten Xavier Johnson, but having one guy buy in, having one guy say, yeah, this is what I believe. This is where I want to play. I believe in what's going to happen here. To go to an 0-18 team, you're not walking into a team that's been having success. Far from it. And to do that and make two commitments, really. To commit to reclassify and commit to the program. It speaks to Jeff Capel as a recruiter, but McGowens had to buy in for that. And it was important that he did. When they finally won an ACC game for the first time in almost 2 years, he was the leading scorer. And when they won another one 2 games later, it was Trey McGowens. He scored 30 points in those games. And they go on a long losing streak, and he struggled during that losing streak. But when they broke the losing streak in the regular season finale against Notre Dame, he had a big game again. This is not a surprise. It was just like it was not a surprise this past year when Pitt went on a 7-game losing streak to end the regular season, and they broke it when McGowens had his first double-digit game since before the losing streak started. It's not hard to draw connections here that when Trey McGowens played well, Pitt played well. He was important to their success, and I don't think you should forget that. And he's going to become a footnote in history. He's going to become a forgotten player. He's going to be, they're going to move on. They're going to recruit over him. And this program's probably going to go on. I think they're going to have success under Jeff Capel. And as they do, we're going to forget about Trey McGowens. And I don't think we should. I think he was an important building block for this program, for what Jeff Capel's building in this program. And whatever success they have is going to owe at least some, at least in some part, is going to owe some gratitude to Trey McGowens and what he meant to the team and what he meant to the program. And I don't think you should forget about that. I think it's important. Bigger picture, Trey McGowens leaving means Pitt has 2 spots to work with. So one of those is reserved for William Jeffress, the 4-star forward out of Erie, who's trying to figure out what he's going to do after he reclassified to the 2020 class. Should have another year of high school, but he's not going to. He's going to get done and go to a college this summer, he thinks. But obviously, like all recruits, his plans are on hold right now while he tries to figure out what the heck is going on in the world. And then more specifically, more acutely, what's going on in recruiting and college sports and the NCAA and the dead period and all those things. One spot is reserved for him. The other spot, and I wrote about this last week on Friday, that it's not like it takes a genius to figure it out. They're going to try and get a guard, a grad transfer guard. They're going to try to get someone else to come in and play because with Ryan Murphy and Trey McGowens both transferring, you kind of end up in the same depth situation you were in a year ago. This past year, they had a major depth problem at guard. So when Ryan Murphy got hurt and had to miss 3 games, it was Johnson, McGowens, and walk-on. And then that walk-on got hurt. And so the depth was cut into even more. And if Johnson got into foul trouble, he had to come back in and play with 2 fouls at the end of in the first half. If McGowens or Johnson just weren't playing well and they needed to go to the bench to get their head sorted out, there weren't options to do that. You didn't have the personnel to do it because you only had 3 scholarship guards. they've got one guard committed, which is good, and they've got Ethiel Horton coming in after sitting out last year due to the transfer. But with Murphy and McGowan's both going, you've still just got 3 scholarship guards. You're in the same situation that you were in a year ago. And, I mean, it's a no-brainer, and it should be a relatively easy sell to a graduate transfer guard to say, come in, you play for a year, you help us, you play a ton of minutes because we want to try and have an actual rotation at guard instead of just, playing guys 37 minutes a game. We want to have a real rotation out there. And, come in and play. We're going to give you lots of minutes in the ACC. It should be a sell for Jeff Capel. It should be something he can pull off. And, we've seen over the last few days, over the last week or so, Pitt express interest in a number of graduate transfer guards. And as well they should. And they probably expressed an interest in more guards than we've got confirmed publicly. Because that should be the priority. Right now, the priorities are getting William Jeffers and getting a graduate transfer guard. 1 and 2. And that fills your 2 spots. And then you get that grad transfer guard spot back again for next year. It works out perfect. That's what they need to focus on. And I think that's what they will focus on. It's what they are focusing on. And, we'll see what they're able to do. Again, this whole situation, the pandemic situation, is throwing a major wrench into recruiting right now. And I know that's not the top priority. I mean, that's not among the top 10 priorities for 99% of the population of this world, of this country, of this state, of this city, this region, all county. It's not a top 10 priority, but you see the website right here, Panther-Lair.com, right? You see pictures of Pitt basketball, headlines of Pitt sports. So, I mean, that's what we're talking about here. And in terms of recruiting, this pandemic is mucking it up considerably. The NCAA created an emergency dead period. And what that means, it doesn't mean coaches can't talk to recruits. Coaches and recruits can talk all the time. They can call each other all they want. They can, text message, direct message, do all those things that they want to do. What they can't do is visit. Recruits cannot go on campus. Coaches cannot go recruit off campus. That's what the dead period affects. People always talk about dead period, quiet period, contact period. People don't know what that means. They say, well, that means you can't do this. That means you can't do that. All it affects is in-person contact. All right? Contact period, you can have recruits on campus, and you can go visit them in their schools and their homes. You can have in-person contact on campus or off campus. Quiet period, you can have in-person contact on campus only. Off campus, no in-person contact. Dead period, no in-person contact at all. Not on campus and not off campus. Those are the distinctions. That's what's distinct about a quiet period, a contact period, and a dead period. It's all about in-person contact and where it can happen. Right now should be a quiet period, which means recruits can visit, which jams you up on football and basketball. Because football, this should be a big time for juniors to get out on the road and visit schools. I mean, last year, Pitt had a ton of guys come in for spring practice, and it was a big deal. A lot of guys from Virginia came in, and a lot of, some of the local guys like Dayon Hayes. I mean, they should be getting recruits in to visit all the time on Saturdays during the spring, and they're not. None of those things are happening. And then basketball, this is a crucial time for these guys in the 2020 recruiting class. Some of those guys who are still hanging on out there, and transfers who should be taking official visits right now, should be going and checking out campuses to make a decision over the next couple weeks to decide, what school they're going to attend in the summer. I mean, the summer's coming up. It's the end of March right now, last week of March is coming up. So you're 2 months away from June, which is when recruits turn into college players. They move onto campus and they start attending school. And these guys, whether it's a William Jeffers or it's one of these graduate transfers, and there's probably more onus on these graduate transfers because a guy like William Jeffers who reclassified into the 2020 class, in theory, could just go back to high school for another year. And wait, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's highly unlikely, but he's got no opportunity to take official visits. And these graduate transfers, I mean, they really have no options. They're gonna have to pick a school sight unseen. Unless it's a college that they visited while they were recruits originally, they're gonna have to pick a college sight unseen. It's an unprecedented situation all around, right? Top to bottom. Worldwide, it's an unprecedented situation, and certainly in the perspective of, or from the perspective of college athletics, it's, totally without precedent. And guys are going to have to make decisions, like I say, without the full wealth of knowledge and information that they should get going through the recruiting process. All right, let's hit the questions a little bit and see what we've got here. A few of the comments before we switch over to some football and some other things. A few comments about the change with the radio show, and that's just that is what it is. Royce Beacom, it may be too early to ask, but who's the heir apparent at the 2 spot? And I mean, I think Ethiel Horton is the guy who steps in there now. Unless they get a graduate transfer who's a better option than Horton, I think you're starting guards next year, Xavier Johnson and Ethiel Horton. That's how Horton has been talked up by Jeff Capel and his teammates. That's the position he's expected to fill. So I think he is the guy. He is the one who is going to step into that role. Tony Boff, does Pitt have a shot at Kareem Main? Kareem Main's a 5-star prospect from Canada who just kind of popped up as being connected to Pitt recently. I'll be honest, we don't have a lot of info on that. We're kind of digging in. Our guy Corey Evans at Rivals is digging in on that as well, and we're seeing what we can find out there. Josh Newark says, I never found McGowan's ball handling skills that great. He had that one behind the back dribble he always went to change his direction. I mean, there's a system of basketball, a style of basketball that probably fits Trey McGowan's. I just don't know if it's what Pitt was doing. I just don't know if it's Pitt's style of basketball and Jeff Capel's style of basketball. And so, can he be a point guard in college? Maybe. With the right team, the right setup, yeah, I think he probably can. It wasn't going to happen at Pitt, and it's not just system and style of play; it's also roster. They've got a point guard at Pitt, and they've got a backup point guard at Pitt in Ethiel Horton. So McGowan's just wasn't going to get significant minutes at that. With Pitt's roster, the way it's set up. Andy Pappas, do you think there will be any more departures from the Hoops team? What percentage chance do we have with William Jeffress? And I think Scott Lynch asked about chances with William Jeffress as well. Jeffress, I still think Pitt is the favorite for Jeffress, the 4-star prospect from Erie. But like we say, I mean, the situation's going to muck everything up. And I don't think you can totally rule out the possibility that he decides to wait until 2021. I think it's unlikely. I think he still picks a college, but I mean, it's such an unprecedented situation. It's tough to tell what anybody's going to do with it because it's tough to tell what the situation is going to become. And Andy asked, do you think there'll be any more departures from the Hoops team? I think they're set for right now. I mean, it kind of seems like if more was going to happen, it would have happened. So, Kyle Campbell says, looks like Tony is staying at this point. Audie's Tony. Any insight? I don't know. I mean, I didn't really get that strong of a sense that he was going to transfer. I mean, it seemed like it became a situation where it was rumored that everybody was going to transfer. We haven't seen Audie's Tony make a move yet, and I'm inclined to think that things are going to kind of stay pat, stay the way they are with the roster, and have 7 guys coming back. And it's 7 guys coming back plus 4 recruits coming in, and then fill those 2 other spots however you can. 404 Strang says, could you see Trey McGowan's decide to stay at Pitt due to the current worldwide situation, especially since he won't be able to take visits to other schools for the foreseeable future? I think once I think that's done. You know what I mean? I think once you go to the extent of making an announcement, making a statement, Pitt announces it, Pitt makes a statement. I think once you go that far, you're pretty much out. I think you've gone in, and not in a Pat Narduzzi, once you leave, we don't want you back kind of sense. I think it's pretty clear that that's what McGowan's intends to do, and what he intends, he doesn't intend to be at Pitt anymore. And is it more complicated? Is it more challenging? Is it more difficult? The fact that he can't take visits? Absolutely. But I don't think it's, I think he's gone. Let's see. Chris Nguyen I apologize, Chris. You were on the podcast, or you were on the live stream last week, and I apologize if I Nguyen. I apologize if I mispronounced that. But Chris is an easy name to remember. Any thoughts on Terrell Brown versus Abdul Kareem Coulibaly? And that's an interesting one. It's going to be I'm really interested to see how those minutes play out next year. Terrell Brown is he's just the most sort of tantalizing and frustrating player. You know what I mean? He's just, you see moments where you say, my God, this guy could be really good in the ACC. This guy could be an effective player in the ACC, and then he just can't do it consistently. He just doesn't do it consistently. He just, for some reason, won't do it consistently. And you really get to a point where you wonder if it's a choice. You know, how dedicated are you to this thing? Because you've got the ability, you've got the size, you've got the talent. Sometimes you just don't look like you want to do it. And his minutes fell off down the stretch. Coulibaly was getting more minutes. Hamilton was starting over him. And he just, but he hasn't made any announcements. So, I mean, it seems like he's coming back. And so I'm curious to see how the minutes would play out there. I think, Abdul Kareem Coulibaly showed a lot of promise late in the season. He had his moments where you really thought, okay, I can see this guy making it work. I can see this guy playing and being an effective player. We'll see how the minutes shake out. I really don't know what to expect out of those guys because we have to see how much development Coulibaly can make from his freshman year to his sophomore year, and then we have to see if Brown really wants to do it heading into his senior season. I don't think center is going to be a strength for Pitt. I don't think it's just not going to be, roster wise, personnel wise, it's not going to be a strength. This team's strengths, again, obviously are going to be on the perimeter. I think the forwards, Audis Toney and Justin Champagnie, are going to be probably the best players on the team. But, who knows what Xavier Johnson can do from sophomore year to junior year? Who knows if Ethiel Horton really is everything of what they say he is. And they've said a lot. They've certainly talked him up quite a bit. And so if those guys can, if Horton can live up to it and Johnson can get a little better as a junior than he was as a sophomore, then, I think the guards can be pretty good too. And this is what it comes around to for me. And I was thinking about this, in light of the transfers. Not that I necessarily think the transfers are addition by subtraction, because I don't think that. I think this team, it would help to have Ryan Murphy on the team. I think it would help to have Trey McGowan's on the team, aside from the scholarship spots that you need to add some of the guys that you want to add. But I think this roster has a chance to be pretty good next year. Maybe not deep, but good. I think Johnson can. I think Johnson can get a little bit better. I think the talent is there. The pure talent is there. I'm just going to take their word. Jeff Capel doesn't seem like the type to oversell on a guy that isn't playing. So I'm going to take his word on Ethiel Horton, that Horton really is all that. And then, I think Champagnie and Toney can be really good. And then, you've got a couple different guys to throw out there at the center positions. So I think they've got a chance. They should be better than they were this year. They should win more than 6 games in the ACC. They should finish above 500, and they should legitimately be a bubble team. Particularly if they add a graduate transfer guard. Then, yeah, they should be a bubble team. And maybe more, depending on how some of those guys progress through the offseason. All right, let's flip over to a little bit of football talk here as we move through the first half hour of the show. We got a couple other basketball questions, though. Josh Newark, with Brown, if it's truly an effort thing, doesn't Capel have an obligation to run him off the team? I don't think guys get run off a team as much as people might assume. I think we throw around that phrase like tell a guy to get on with his life's work or run him off the team. I don't think that happens as much as you think it does. I think if there's a problem, you know what I mean? If there's a disciplinary problem or an academic problem, then yeah, guys can be dismissed from the team. I think there are also very honest, very candid conversations between coaches and players at the end of every season and throughout the season where, I mean, a guy is going to know where he stands. You know, a guy like Terrell Brown is going to look at the minutes he got late in the season. He's going to think about the conversations he's had with Jeff Capel. And, I mean, he knows where he stands. He knows what his position is on the team. He knows where he fits in and what kind of minutes he's likely going to get. So I guess what I'm saying, I mean, running a guy off the team, I don't think it happens maybe that kind of severely. The message can get across, but I don't see Jeff Capel trying to I don't see him really dismissing Terrell Brown. I think he probably wants to coach him up and get the, try and help Terrell Brown get to his potential. And then Brock Medanik, sorry man, who has who has the most potential out of the 2020 Hoops recruiting class. I mean, John Hughley's really interesting. A guy who coming in, he's going to play the center position. I mean, that's probably your third center next year, and who knows, maybe depending on how it works out, maybe he's your second center. He's going to be in there getting minutes with Brown and Coulibaly, and I think. I think you'd probably put him pretty high on the list right now. Femi Odekel is pretty interesting, as a wing. I mean, but if you're looking at guys for their impact in this coming season, I mean, I guess I would say Hughley. Although, I think there's a lot of it's going to depend on minutes and how the guys around them develop and pan out. All right, let's talk a little football. Because Brock had a question about football as well. Have you heard anything about Pitt football looking for a grad transfer at the linebacker position? Kylan Johnson helped out a lot last year. I haven't seen anything about linebacker. Seen some stuff with some offensive linemen, seen some stuff with maybe some other positions, but linebacker hasn't really been one of them. And I don't know. I mean, last year I could see why they might feel like they needed a graduate transfer linebacker, and Kylan Johnson was a good option who came available, which, you can't really ignore that fact. Some of it is availability. Say, wait, we've got an opportunity to get a guy here that could help us at this position or that position. It's not necessarily a need as much as you get an opportunity to get someone who can help you. If they find another guy on Kylan Johnson's level, then yeah, you probably would try to get him if you have an opportunity to get him. I don't think they have the need at linebacker this year, though. I think if you look at a potential starting three of Chase Pine in the middle, and then Phil Campbell and Cam Bright at the outside spots. You've got three experienced guys, a lot of them with some starting experience. Chase Pine has started a handful of games at middle linebacker. He's played a bunch at all three linebacker spots, really, or at least two of the three. And then Bright and Campbell both played a ton last year and started games and kind of rotated between the outside linebacker spots. And I think you've got a really good starting three there. Then you get into your depth and you start to have a few question marks. I mean, I think Wendell Davis as a backup middle linebacker is pretty solid. Your outside linebacker spots, you're going to be relying on some younger guys to step in there, but that's what you have to do sometimes. But I don't think they really necessarily need a graduate transfer at linebacker for this year. Now, I can understand why they went and got Lucas Kroll to line up at tight end. I can understand why they might be looking at some of these other spots that they might want to fill in with some graduate transfers. But I don't know if linebacker is necessarily one where they need it this year. Let's see, got another question from Colin Towle. Says, thoughts on the running back position? Running backs are interesting to me. I think Izzy Abanikanda, the freshman who came in and enrolled early, made a really positive impression. I think he's got a chance to go out and make an impact this year. I think he's faster than any of the other backs other than maybe Vincent Davis, but he's bigger than Vincent Davis. I think he's a little stronger and more physical than Vincent Davis. So I think he can get out there and make an impact this year due to his speed and also due to his his body. I think he's ready to take on. He's ready to take on that, just the physical nature of playing college football. The other guys, A.J. Davis and Joey Yellen, Joey Yellen. Sorry, somebody, Royce Beacom just asked a question about Joey Yellen, so I apologize. He got in my head there. A.J. Davis, Vincent Davis, Todd Sibley, those guys are good players, I think. I think they each showed flashes. I mean, Vincent Davis showed what he could do with his speed. I think A.J. Davis is maybe more in the Quadriolis and Darren Hall kind of mold, maybe not the kind of guy who's going to blow you away necessarily, but with some good blocking, I think he can be an effective runner. And there were even points last season, at least 1 or 2 points, maybe after the Syracuse game or somewhere around there, where I thought, you know what, he could be a number one running back. He's not the most dynamic player. He's not the most dynamic running back on the roster, but I think he could potentially be a number one running back. And then Todd Sibley had a pretty outstanding stretch, the Miami game when he was running out of the Wildcat, and then he got hurt. So, I think he was still out this spring. So, I mean, you're waiting to see what his availability is going to be like when they start playing again. So, I mean, the door is open. Even there's a bunch of upperclassmen on this team. The door is open for Izzy Abanikanda to walk in and get a ton of snaps. I think it's going to be running back by committee. I don't think there's going to be one guy who dominates the carries, but I think there's no reason Abanikanda can't get a lot of carries in this offense. Royce Beacom asks, no word on Joey Yellen's appeal from the NCAA to play this year. No, there hasn't been anything. I mean, nothing that I've seen, and Pitt obviously hasn't announced anything, and those kind of things. You never know. I mean, it's completely up in the air on whether or not he. I can't place betting odds on it because I've given up on trying to predict what the NCAA is going to do. It's unpredictable. They're inconsistent. And there are some situations where there's stuff that you don't know, privacy issues, and that's what contributes to a guy being eligible or not being eligible. I have no idea if the NCAA is going to give Joey Yellen a waiver to play in 2020. If they do, I know inevitably the next question is, if Joey Yellen can play in 2020, is he going to push Kenny Pickett for the starting job? No, Kenny Pickett's going to be the starting quarterback. What Joey Yellen does is, if he's eligible to play, he gives Pitt another arm. You know what I mean? To potentially be the backup, or to be a guy who steps in there when if Pickett has to miss snaps or something like that, or replace Pickett for whatever reason, it would give them another guy to turn to. But he's not going to win the starting job. I mean, nothing is guaranteed, but I highly doubt that anybody other than Kenny Pickett is going to be the starter for Pitt, in 2020, as long as he's healthy. So that's kind of what I see. Let me see here. I had another question that came in. Scott Lynch, what about a sophomore that did not play as a freshman, but could make an impact as a sophomore? So looking at the redshirt freshman here, kind of going down the list, I think Will Gibson is a really interesting guy to look at, the wide receiver from Aliquippa. He got hurt last year, he got hurt in camp last year in August, and then missed the whole season. He's a really good player. I'm bullish on these wide receivers, and if you've listened to the podcast or read things I've written, you know that this is the case, that I'm bullish on these guys. And I think, there's a lot of potential in that wide receiver group. But almost to the point where I look at, Taysier Mack and Jared Wayne and Shockey Jacques Louis as your top three, with then, Dontavius Butler-Jenkins or Trey Tipton, Jordan Addison, Jalen Barden kind of fitting in there. I'm not sure where Will Gibson's I'm not really sure where Will Gibson's role is, how he exactly would fit in, but I think he's a really talented receiver. He can move. He's got decent size. I think he could potentially contribute. I tell you, you want a redshirt freshman, kind of a, what would you call it? Dark horse to get a lot of playing time and potentially even, maybe win a starting job. Matt Gonsalves. And I wouldn't ordinarily mention an offensive lineman when talking about redshirt freshmen who could get on the field, but we know there's an opening at least one tackle job. Carter Warren might hold on to his left tackle job, but that right tackle job is going to be open. He's going to be in that competition. Gonsalves. The coaches have said a lot of good things about him on and off the record. You talk to him about, hey, which guy has impressed you, this guy or that guy? And Matt Gonsalves, his name comes up. Now, do I expect a redshirt freshman to go out and win a starting job? That's a hard sell. It's tough for me to sit and say, yeah, I think Gonsalves is going to win the starting job, but I think he's gonna push for it. And he's going to compete, and I think he's going to get himself on the 2 deep as well. I'll tell you another one. Bam Brema. I've talked about this guy a lot. I've talked about this guy enough that, if and when he does contribute, you're probably going to remember that I mentioned him. And I'm not saying that I can, tout myself that I knew anything, but I hear a lot of positive things about Bam Brema, the defensive end out of Loyalsock Township High School. And, redshirt freshman, didn't play at all last year. He didn't even play, in the 4 games or anything like that. But there's a lot of rave reviews coming out, and they're going to graduate Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver from defensive end this year. They got Deslin Alexander back for another year. Habakkuk Baldonado and John Morgan have 2 more years. I think Bam Brema gets snaps this year and then gets in that rotation of the top 4 next season. He might be that good. And another defensive lineman, Kalijah Cansey. This is a guy who, I think Jim Hammett, who writes for us, made this observation at one of the practices that Kalijah Cansey has the same kind of body as Jalen Twyman, which we're not going to say the same kind of body as an Aaron Donald, but that sort of undersized, quicker defensive tackle, playmaking defensive tackle, that pass rushing defensive tackle, which I think we're almost at a point where we might take that for granted. From Aaron Donald, you had a little lull there for a couple years, but you got Jalen Twyman, Keyshawn Camp's going to come back, and he's effective like that. And Kalijah Cansey is going to be the next kind of guy who comes in and is able to effectively rush the passer out of the defensive tackle position. So he's another one that you keep an eye on as a redshirt freshman who could get out there. Brandon Hill, the safety, is going to be in the rotation as one of the top 4 safeties, just simply because he has to be. You're going to have DeMar Hamlin and Paris Ford, of course. And then you get Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill. I mean, there's only 5 safeties on the team, 5 scholarship safeties right now. Those 4 plus Buddy Mack, the freshman. You could potentially see one of these incoming guys, Rashad Battle or Javonte Royal or Hunter Sellers, moving to safety. But right now, there's 5 scholarship safeties on this roster, and one of them's a true freshman who rolled early. You can't rule him out. But Brandon Hill is going to find himself on the 2 deep. So, I mean, those are guys that I think you're going to have to keep an eye on. Colin Towell says, I'm interested to see Davis Bevel and Joey Yellen compete for the following season, compete for the starting positions. And absolutely. And I said that going into spring camp this year, that the backup job, the competition for the backup quarterback job between Nick Patty, don't forget Patty, Colin. I mean, don't forget Patty. But the competition between Nick Patty, Davis Bevel, and Joey Yellen was really interesting. And it was going to be really interesting because of what it would portend for the 2021 season. That you would think that whoever wins that backup job would be the front runner to be the starter in 2021. Now, if Joey Yellen's not eligible, he's obviously not going to be the backup in 2020. And so you can't, he's not going to, it would change the complexion of things a little bit. But, that competition was going to be really interesting. Now, we won't get to see that. There'll be a backup competition in August in training camp. God willing, there is training camp. There'll be a backup competition in training camp, and that will probably go a long way in deciding who's the incumbent starter or the presumptive starter entering spring camp 2021. But yeah, that's going to be really interesting. It's going to be interesting to watch these guys compete for the backup job, and then, first real wide open quarterback competition in a long time. Maybe since 2015 is going to take place in 2021. And then Royce Beacom, one more question here. How much will the loss of spring ball hurt the freshmen and the transfers? I mean, it doesn't help. It certainly makes it harder. Those are 12 practices that those guys aren't going to get. And I wouldn't limit it, though, to the freshmen and the transfers. I mean, that's big. Kenny Pickett and Lucas Krull need to get comfortable working together. Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison need to get comfortable working together. And Izzy Bonaconda needs to work on blitz pickup. Somebody else said, Eric Garver said, if Abonaconda can pick up the blitz, the sky's the limit. Yeah, I mean, I think so too. If he can do that If he can play 3 downs, then he's absolutely going to be, a major factor in this offense. And that hurts those guys. But you know what? It's not just them, though, because that offensive line is unsettled, totally unsettled. You got Jimmy Morsey, and I guess Bryce Hargrove, you would say. But then you got both tackle spots and the other guard spot that I think are up for grabs. And you might have a returning starter at left tackle, and you might have a returning starter at right guard. But, I mean, those guys have to, in my mind, have to fight to hold their jobs. And then once you've got it sort of settled of who's working with who, they've got to get used to working next to each other. And they've got to get used to working with Kenny Pickett. I mean, they've got to all get comfortable working as a unit. And this is 12 practice sessions that they're just not going to have. And that's rough. That's rough to overcome. That's a setback. The only minor silver lining is that everybody else has to deal with it too. That it's not unique to Pitt. Everybody else got, gypped out of a bunch of spring practices. But yeah, it absolutely is a setback and absolutely hurts them. I mean, is it going to be the difference between winning 7 and winning 10? I don't know. They still have a very good defense coming back, a great defense coming back. They still have a lot of returning starters and veteran players on offense. But man, it hurts to miss out on that practice time. Flip side, they're not replacing the offensive coordinator. If this was a new offensive coordinator and now they're trying to install a new offense and they don't have those practices, that hurts even more. So this is a good thing they're not trying to deal with that, right? All right, this is the last question from Brock Medanik. Again, I'm going to get it right one of these times, man. Send me a DM or something and tell me how to pronounce your name. What are your initial thoughts on Narduzzi? Hasn't had any breakout seasons yet, of course. He has won the Coastal back in 2018, but just can't get over the hump of 7 to 8 wins year in, year out. And he only has one bowl win, if I'm not mistaken. You would hope this is the team that breaks out as they look good on paper with all these players returning. So I was going to talk a little bit about expectations and Pat Narduzzi and kind of what it all means in the context of a lot of different things, particularly like in the context of just recent history, in the last 20 years of history. But here we are, we're already, 45 minutes into the podcast, and I feel like there's a long way to go into this discussion and conversation. But I'll throw this out there, and you can think about this, and you can react to it. And you can send me your responses and let me know what you think about it. But I'll throw this out there. All right. I know there's a feeling among Pitt fans that it's peaked. That it's peaked under Pat Narduzzi. That Pitt under Narduzzi has gotten as good as it's going to get. Or that this season potentially could show us how good it will get because he's got a returning 3-year starter at quarterback. He's got a great defense coming back. Everything's set up to have a lot of success, right? And so I think a lot of Pitt fans have a feeling of, well, we're going to find out this year just how good it could potentially be. And if it only ends up being 8 wins or 7 wins or something like that, then I think a lot of fans are going to feel like, well, this is the wrong way to go then. This is not the right guy. He's got a ceiling. He's got a peak, and he's hit it, and it's not going to get any better. And we need to move on and find a new coach. And I understand that sentiment, and I understand where that sentiment comes from. And the reason I really understand it well, and the reason I can kind of relate to it, and why I can recognize it and empathize with it, and appreciate it, and all those things, is because I saw that same sentiment 10 years ago. Right? We all now look back and say, Dave Wanstead, man, he had that program. It was in a good place. It wasn't good, but for some reason they got rid of him. They never should have got rid of him because the program was in a good place. It was stable. He was building something. They could have kept him for a couple more years. And this is what we say now, 10 years later. We reflect on it that way. But 10 years ago, fresh off of 2008 with the Bowling Green loss and the Rutgers loss and the Sun Bowl loss. And fresh off of 2009 with the Cincinnati loss. And fresh off of 2010 with a bunch of guys getting arrested and getting blown out at home by Miami and West Virginia and losing to freaking UConn in football, where you just had to make a stop on 4th and 1 in their territory and you couldn't do it, people were saying the same thing. People were having the same thoughts. They were, no matter what they say now, at that time, it sounded a lot like what I think the sentiment will be if this year's another 8-win season. That it reached a peak. It reached a ceiling, and it was time to move on because Wani was never going to get to the next level. And if you remember back then, if you were around back then, if you were on the message boards back then, and you remember what it was like, that was the sentiment. And that's why it's so familiar to me now. And I just wonder. Now, I'm not gonna push that point any further. I just want you to think about that. That's your homework for this week. Think back to what you were thinking at the end of the 2008 season, or the end of the 2009 season, or the end of the 2010 season, and see how it relates to what you're thinking now, or what you might be thinking if they only win 8 games this year. And see if it, I don't know, see how it compares. And see if it changes your thinking about what the expectation should be for 2020. Corey Colton says, can't you save this for week 3 of the shutdown? And honestly, Corey, I was planning on, and I have a lot more sort of historical context, things about disappointing seasons and expectations, and when expectations have been highest, and whether the expectations have been met or not. And we're going to talk about, we're going to circle back to this point, because I want you guys to think about that stuff. All right, I want you to think about what I just said, and I don't know. We'll come back and we'll talk about it again next week, and I'm probably going to write about it in the 321 column this Friday, because if you listen to the podcast at all, there's overlap between these podcasts and the 321 column that I put on Panther-Lair.com on Fridays. The 3 observations, the 2 questions we have, the 1 prediction we make. There's a bit of overlap because, my creativity has its limits. I need 6 topics for the 321 column. I can't come up with 6 topics for that thing, and then 2 or 3 other topics for the 10 topics every week, and not talking about on-campus stadiums. It's not easy to do. They already fixed the uniforms. Well, they, close enough, but there's not enough. There aren't always enough topics to support the podcast and the column. So there's a lot of overlap. So some of this stuff is going to come up in the column. And like I said, we'll talk about it again next week, because I do want to talk about this idea of disappointments and expectations and things like that, because I've been thinking a lot about the last 20 years of Pitt football. If you haven't seen it on Panther-Lair.com, we've actually got a bracket going right now, a tournament style bracket of the last 20 Pitt football teams, 2000 to 2019. It's 20 teams. Which one's the best? And we're using whatifsports.com. It's a great website where they'll simulate games for you, and they'll give you like a box score and scoring plays and all this kind of stuff to tell you what happens if you put one team from history against another. And so I've been matching them up, and I had this team against that team. The 2016 team was like a 5 seed, and they took on the 12 seed, which was the 2000 team, and they got upset. The 2000 team knocked them off. I was surprised about that one. That was a bit of a surprising upset. 2009 was the number 1 overall seed because they won 10 games. So, that makes sense, right? 2002, probably like a forgotten 9-win team. Anyway, so I've been thinking a lot about that stuff, and we're probably going to write about it this week. So think about what I said. Think about what we talked about here near the end of this podcast. I appreciate you sticking with it throughout the podcast. I appreciate everybody on the live stream. It was great of you guys to hang out and have a little conversation again. Make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I say it's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Everybody out there saying there's nothing going on in the world of sports. In the world of sports, there's nothing going on. It's true. There's no games being played. There's no practices being held. But we got stuff to write about. We got stuff to talk about. We've got content. If you're looking for Pitt content, you go to Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And of course, we have the message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of your closest Pitt fan friends all day, every day, talking about Pitt and everything else. So go to the website, Panther-Lair.com. Get yourself some New Belgium, Voodoo Ranger. This is the Starship IPA. Any of it's good. All the Voodoo Rangers. Go grab some of that. If you can. You can still buy beer, right? Yeah. Go buy some beer. Don't spend too much time outside. Get inside and but get some beer and then come back in. So Like Eric Garver said here in the comments, man, stay safe, everybody. Follow the rules. Just do what you're supposed to do so we can all get back to hanging out outside and going to football practices and things like that. So do what you're supposed to do. Stay safe. Pay attention to what they tell you and follow the rules. And check out the website, too, because that's where it's all happening. Panther-Lair.com. We'll be back not on Saturday morning for the Panthers Insider Show. Like I said, that show is going on hiatus for a little bit, but we will have a podcast for you, an audio-only podcast, no video live stream, audio only later in the week. So look for that. Wash your hands, like Corey says. Wash your hands. Look for the podcast. Stay tuned to the website. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. What else do I have to tell you to do? Get a beer. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe. Stay happy. Stay busy. We'll talk to you next week, Tuesday night, 8:30, right here on the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks so much for checking in. We'll talk to you. Have a safe week, everybody.